everybody, and welcome to the next episode of the Mentors Musings podcast. I'm Sarah Holly, and I'm here with my mentor, Abraham Snell. This is episode 3 of the overall podcast, but it's actually part 2 of our discussion about tilt profiles and discussing tilt from different perspectives across each episode. So the previous time we talked about tilt from a theoretical perspective. We shared that my tilt profile is structure, Abraham's is connection, and we just kind of talked about it from a high level. This episode, we really want to get deeper into knowing oneself and understanding, really what does the tilt profile mean for each of us. And then if time allows, we'll also address knowing others and being able to better work with others. That said, this might end up being a longer discussion because there's always, lots of insights to be shared between the two of us. So if we run out of time, we'll chat about it in the next episode. Just one kind of thing to note about, the knowing others portion of the discussion. Knowing others doesn't necessarily mean to be judgmental, but to understand other people's habits, which will allow us to work more harmoniously with them. So we're looking forward to diving deeper into that topic. But for now, again, knowing oneself, there's lots that we can discuss here, but I have a few questions that I wanted to give to Abraham to, discuss, and we can kind of go back and forth about it. The first one is about, it's about my tilt, but we can always, get into other ones as well. So the structured tilt, our inner motivations are to feel in control of our destinies and to become masterful in our expertise. And personally, I feel like this translates into me being somewhat risk averse. So, Abraham, my question for you is, how do you feel about taking professional risks, and how do you go about evaluating and either embracing or avoiding those risks?
I think we are starting in the place that we need to start, which is the knowing yourself. And so, why do I say knowing yourself? So, the fact that you said you're a bit risk averse. Some people are risk averse. Some people are risk takers, and everywhere in between, right? And so, knowing that about yourself is likely also going to inform your decision. Because if you are risk averse, then the things you need to do have more to do with stepping out and taking more risk versus a person who already takes a lot of risk. They need to figure out how to be cautious, how to analyze opportunities before they just jump out there. Because in that case, they could just find themselves failing a lot over and over again. So it takes intentional action to take a risk, right? So as I talk about knowing yourself, when I know how I am and when I know my tendencies, I can intentionally, if those tendencies are a weakness for what I'm trying to do, I can intentionally try to mitigate those weaknesses. If they're a strength, I can intentionally lean on those strengths or even lean into those strengths to make them better. The other thing about risk, so, I guess my short answer is, of course, you should take risk. But taking risk needs to be calculated. Um, but here's the thing, you can't progress without taking a risk, right? Honestly, even if you're risk averse, getting in a car and driving is a risk, right? So in order for you to get from point A to point B, there is some risk involved. And the question is, how do we evaluate those risks and mitigate the downside of those risks? I would also say that taking risk depends on the relationship. If you trust your chain of command, your manager, your director, or if you trust your coworkers, you're probably more, and you trust that they will support you if things get tough, you're probably more likely to take a risk But I mean, we kind of fall on both sides of the spectrum. I'm a person that's probably too trusting to start out with. But as humans, we also need to learn to trust others, right? That's a risk in and of itself. So figuring out the trust level in your relationships and your work relationships, but this
Chips.
also what we talk about also applies to your personal life. It's really not different. Taking risk in your personal life requires you to trust, you know, someone, a support system, something.
Yeah, yeah. And if I may, Abraham, I love how you brought this topic, of risk, back to trust and relationships and everything, especially, with you being somebody who tilts toward connection, it's all the more appropriate. So I think it makes perfect sense that, that would come to mind for you when kind of responding to this question.
Yeah, yeah, something about relationships is always going to show up because that's kind of what I lean toward. Um, the other thing about taking risk and trusting is if you don't trust anyone, if you don't step out, if you don't take risk, you tend to not invest in things, right? And so when you don't invest in things, you can't expect a return. That word investment, we think about the stock market and all that. In order to get a return on my investment, I actually have to invest. I have to put something out there. So there are going to be times when risk don't pay off. There will be disappointments. There will be learning moments. I believe it was Nelson Mandela who said, you either win or you learn. You never lose. And so taking risk um, and investing is only going to make you richer. And I don't just mean financially richer, but I mean you're gonna have richer relationships when you trust, when you take risks. You're gonna have richer experiences because you're gonna invest yourself in those experiences. I think there's a term that they call um, being present, and being present means you are taking the risk of letting all these walls down, whether they be emotional, trust, intellectual, experience. Sometimes people hide their experience so they won't get asked to do a certain project. If you don't let those walls down, you won't be able to be fully in that moment. And so I believe that you miss out on a rich experience when that happens.
Yeah. And I guess hearing you talk about that, it makes me wonder, can you think of any specific instance where, you took a risk, you trusted in somebody and it paid off?
And it paid off.
Sure.
Wow. Eh,
We'll think about
Yeah, I
it in a
thought you.
positive context.
What's funny is I thought you were going to say when you failed. That's awesome. Um, Coming to Red Hat. So there, I literally had like an hour and a half conversation with the director that hired me, and he put his trust in me. And I was in a job, so I was at a place where I was comfortable from the standpoint of I wasn't, making a ton, like I could be paid more, but I wasn't hurting. It was definitely more than enough to sustain my lifestyle, and for me to do, extra things. It was a job that I knew from head to toe. I had to more or less mastered that role. And I knew the people. It was a great team. I enjoyed the team that I was on. It was a great work environment. It was a place where people go and they stay. And so I, in fact, kind of put up things that would be roadblockers, like, arbitrarily high salary numbers and vacation requests and things like that. Um, but after the conversation and after the fact that he said, "Hey, I want you," um, and then exceeded those artificial boundaries that I put up, I was like, okay, this is really a risk because I'm good right now, but I feel like I really need to take this opportunity. I feel like it's going to benefit me. And here I am. And yes, it has been wonderful. Yeah. Had there been, down moments to this? Absolutely. But overall, I feel like my trajectory is up and to the right. I feel like it has been a wonderful experience. I've done a lot of learning. I'm on a sales team now, and I'd never done sales before, and so that's been a great learning experience. And so my life feels richer because I took that risk. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, how much does intuition come to play when it comes to your decision making and even taking risks? Because you mentioned how you just had this feeling, right? You had this feeling that this was the right opportunity for you and that you should just take it, even though, you weren't 100% sure.
So first of all, let me kind of do a disclaimer on intuition. Um, I think we should have empirical facts yeah, and not just intuition. I think intuition does play a part in it. Okay. But some people either don't pay attention well to their intuition or they're just horrible at intuition. And I'm about 50-50, to be honest with you. Sometimes I will feel very sure of a thing and it will turn out to be absolutely the opposite thing. And so from my vantage point, I did feel like I needed to take advantage of this opportunity, but I also had some empirical things like how am I going to eat? How is this going to affect my life? Things like that. Of course, I came to Red Hat right before COVID, and so about 3 months in, the world shut down for everything. But honestly, even with that, because I work for remotely now, working from home. Um, that didn't really affect me because I had been going into an office, and so but yeah, I would say I definitely felt, kind of in my, as they say, in your spirit. I felt in my spirit that I should take this role, but I don't want to overplay intuition because sometimes you need empirical facts as well.
Sure, sure. That makes a lot of sense. Just using multiple perspectives when coming to a decision because, relying too much on one way of knowing can be dangerous. um,
Yeah.
yeah. Anything else you have on that topic of just you're taking risks, evaluating those risks, and whether to embrace or avoid them?
So, you know, my answer was, of course, we need to take risk. Professional risks are necessary. Personal risks are necessary. Risks are a part of life. I think the skill set is learning to evaluate risk. Um, but here's the thing: there's going to be failures, right? There's going to be times when you launch out to do something that it's not going to succeed. And of course, those are learning experiences. As we said, you win or you learn, you never lose, but you also have to have a healthy image of yourself. Because you failed doesn't make you a failure. So you don't go around thinking I'm a failure because you've had those moments of failure. No, you failed. It was an event, right? It was just a blip on your timeline. You are on a path of success. Man, I sound like a some kind of video, right? But honestly, positive thinking, thinking about yourself in a healthy way. And if you're not thinking about yourself in a healthy way, I encourage you to talk to someone, a counselor, clergy, someone, so that you can start viewing yourself in this positive light. Because just because you fail doesn't make you a failure. So I think just putting a bow on it, saying risk are necessary. Should you fail, just keep moving.
Sure, sure. I think it's definitely important to remind ourselves not to get caught up in negativity bias, because all these positive things can be happening, and then one negative thing comes up, and then it's just like, oh, it's all ruined. But in the grand scheme of things, just like you said, it's kind of a blip. So
Right.
definitely important to
Right.
consider. Well, kind of shifting gears toward this next question that I had. So this is relevant to my work at Red Hat as a digital marketer. So last year, my extended team was focused on all kind of collectively leaning toward the impact tilt, which, just to remind everybody, the impact tilt is a combination of being idea driven and results driven. So the impact tilt is kind of similar to my structure tilt in that we share that results driven component. Um, Whereas the structure tilt, however, also leans into data a little bit more. So there's some overlap, but they are different. But anyway, all that's to say is that this would require me to tap into the idea driven quadrant a little bit more, which it entails like creativity, inspiration, and openness. So that said, I would love to hear about how you tap into creativity in your work, Abraham, or outside of work too.
Oh, one thing I guess I would say about the tilt profile and any profile, because these are good things, and as we've said, as we said in the last episode, they are indicators. They don't define you. And so when people say they're wrong or they're right, it- they're indicators. And most of the times the things they indicate are right. But as humans, we typically have all of the characteristics that are parts of these personality profiles, including creativity. So, uh, first of all, I will say I think you're extremely creative, and that's from someone on the outside looking in. So that's my first thing is the encouragement to say, okay, yeah, I know you're part of this personality category, but I think you're still creative. The other thing is, I'm an engineer, and so for an engineer, I really am kind of uh, an outlier, right? Most engineers are more actually in your profile type, Sarah, and not mine. So I tend to be an outlier there. But I don't think I'm any more creative than some of the people that I've worked with or some of the people that I've experienced in my past. Uh, there are a ton of engineers that I know that are musicians, like I'm a musician, and so um, I think that needs to be said first. Now, how do I tap into creativity? Um, is- I don't know if I have 100% great answer. Sometimes I have to step away from what I'm doing. If I'm thinking about something too much, I think I am in the rut. And so I need to do something totally different, right? So maybe I'll go play on my drum pad, or maybe I will watch I'm a science fiction person. Maybe I'll watch some science fiction. Um I you know, I think the thing about creativity is being aware of fleeting thoughts in the moment. Um And so sometimes something that might seem totally uh, perpendicular to what you're trying to do may actually lead you to an answer. Years ago, I know I'm totally off script now. Years ago, um, I when I used to work for a company called Sun Microsystems, when I would go on site and there would be a really hard problem that we needed to solve, sometimes I did it by mistake the first time, but sometimes I would just find people who weren't connected to computers, and we'd just be talking, and I would say, "Yeah, I'm trying to figure this problem out. Let me explain it to you." And I would try to explain it to them in the most simple terms. And these people might be, admins, or they might be janitors or somebody, no clue about what a computer is from the depth that I need, but they would just say things off the cuff sometimes, and so many times, I can't tell you how many times, it wouldn't be like an exact scientific answer, but it would lead me to something that would actually solve the problem. And so I think we're all creative, and I think creativity isn't just limited to one personality type, but I also don't think it's limited to one type of thing, right? Some of us are more creative in some things than others. And so tapping into creativity, um, I would have to say is probably more of a muscle than it is happenstance, meaning figuring out what are those things that allow me to be aware of 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 thoughts that could lead me to whatever a solution is. Thinking outside the box.
Mhm. Yeah, that's the term or the
Yeah.
phrase.
So yeah, that's kind of my answer.
Sure, sure. And yeah, first of all, I just really appreciate you acknowledging that all of the tilts can be creative. I think as a structured tilt in particular, I'm more analytical and tend to be driven by data. And I think that, those kind of folks can be creative too, because, we're inclined to create solutions to problems. And so I guess lots of the different things can be considered creative. And I also just love the example that you incorporated about your time at Sun Microsystems and how you were able to hear from other people who maybe weren't as technically, as technically informed as you are. It kind of got me thinking about the connection between creativity and collaboration because it's rarely ever, creativity is rarely ever done like in a
Yeah.
bubble.
Yeah, that creativity and collaboration are definitely connected. Um, and in fact, we play off each other as humans all the time. We influence each other as humans. So, if you're in a room or in a meeting and there are multiple people in there, and someone puts out an idea, typically the first person to answer is going to start to kind of influence the other people's answer because they're going to start thinking along that line. Now, in some cases, that you don't want to do that, right? In some cases, you want to avoid that so you can give a creative answer. But people tend to we tend to influence each other and that's a good thing. That part of it is a good thing because collaboration and I know sometimes people say I'm tired of hearing about diversity, but diversity truly does allow greater creativity when people that don't think like you, again, I don't know how many times I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it every time we're in the podcast. I think we are a great team because we are, according to our tilt, we are polar opposites. Um, and I think what happens in those situations is things that are important to you or things that are emotionally that you're emotionally aware of, I may not be, and vice versa. And so when we bring, what we offer to the table, we have all the bases covered, right? Because we are both functioning in our individual truths, who we are, and that and then merging that with someone else for some outcome. And so I'm glad you brought that up. Collaboration and creativity are connected for sure.
Sure, sure. Something else that comes to mind for me is this exercise that I had done, with this group of people where we we were put up into pairs, and then we like shared a story, a personal story with each other, and then by the end of the exercise, the other person had to share your story, but from their perspective. And it was jarring how real it felt when I was like explaining another person's story, but then as if it was like my own story. And yeah, just kind of what you said, like got me thinking about the importance of being able to, put yourself into somebody else's perspective, kind of understand things from their point of view, and then using that as a way to, yeah, just kind of reach a solution that everybody's happy with.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of leads us into our next episode. And so I won't get ahead of ourselves, but knowing others, putting yourself in another person's shoes, being empathetic, um, is is definitely a way towards creativity as well because now you're looking at things in a way that you wouldn't normally look at it. You're looking at things in a way that other people look at it. And I think sometimes we get stuck thinking that everybody thinks the way we do, and the polar opposite is true. If we were all watching a car accident, we would all have our own viewpoint of that car accident. Maybe I shouldn't have said car accident. Should I have said something more positive?
I think it's
Train wreck.
okay. No, something else negative. No worries.
Uh,
I think I totally understand what you're saying. I mean, whether it's a positive or a negative event or anything, and people are gonna perceive it differently. So,
yeah,
I think that makes a lot of sense. Putting it in kind of familiar terms, real life terms.
yeah, yeah.
But
So, do you have any more questions?
I think that is it for now. I think this is a good stopping point for us for this episode. So I just want to thank everybody for tuning in today. We really appreciate y'all's support. Um, for future episodes, just like with this one, it'll be hosted on YouTube and Spotify, and then we'll be sure to share them via LinkedIn. So we look forward to sharing more insights with you next episode.
Absolutely. And by the way, Sarah does all this, y'all. And so, what do you mean she's not creative? She's very creative. So, see y'all later.
Thanks, Abraham. All right. Talk to y'all later.